Chapter 2 of Poppy Playtime fills in a lot of the gaps from Chapter 1, such as revealing the true identity of Experiment 1006 to be not Huggy Wuggy, but rather a different creature called the Prototype, and giving us a better idea of what Poppy and her motives are like. However, there are still a lot of questions as to what's really going on. What happened to the employees at Playtime Co? How is the player connected to all of this? Why are they still alive while everyone else who worked there is gone? While there are many angles to approach these questions from, one that actually helps fill in a lot of the gaps, with some help from other aspects of the game of course, are the death screens that appear in the game. From different colored fade screens to hidden codes to different speakers, there's a lot to unpack from them. And using these screens and a few other game details as reference, I think I have a pretty solid answer to each of these questions and who or what the player really is. But before I get into that, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so that you'll be able to know whenever I release a new video. The primary focus for my videos is usually FNAF, but as you can probably tell from this video, I don't plan on sticking to only FNAF content, and I'm willing to take suggestions on topics to cover. But you're not here to listen to me self-promo, you are here for content, and I intend to deliver. There is a lot to look at in these messages, but rather than starting at the beginning with the words themselves that appear, there are a few key details and patterns in the death screens that are important to note that lend some insight into what each type of death screen may mean. For example, the color the screen turns as the words fade away are different for certain messages. For most of the standard messages, the screen will fade to white. However, for the more unusual messages, the screen will fade to red. Based on this and the actual text in the messages, we can see that there are 4 different kinds of messages, 3 with red screens and 1 with white. Keep this in mind as I explain the actual content of the messages. The messages with red screens are more uncommon, but do seem to be the most straightforward. The standard text red screens specifically seem to be coming from at least one of the experiments, with messages calling Experiment 1006, or the Prototype, wonderful, saying that he has saved them. Though, in recent story events, it seems as though this opinion may have gone down. Connected to this are some of the all-caps red screen messages saying, he is loose, and this is an emergency lockdown, which seems to be in reference to the Prototype escaping and the lockdown that ensued to try to keep him from escaping the factory. This combined with all the other all-caps messages of innovation is key and followed by either thank you science in Chapter 1 or maybe forget death in Chapter 2 makes it seem likely to me that this is either the scientist from the recordings describing the Prototype, what with how he talks about forging onwards in the name of science, or Elliot Ludwig, the guy who wanted to do the experiments to bring life to the toys and would want to forget death given his family past. Honestly, I think it could be both, since Ludwig would have been the one directly in charge of everything, or at least surveying the experiments, but it's not particularly important. The last category of red message is also the strangest and has some similarities to the white screen messages. Both of them have a message followed by the words get up, before the words fade to the color. However, unlike the white screen messages, the main message of the red screens are written in code, something that from what I've been able to find is called Unicode Shifted Cipher. Based on some Reddit users' translations, the messages from each chapter read stay, they need help, and they're just hungry respectively before the get up message appears. With these, it's a bit interesting. For one, whoever is speaking wants the person that they're talking to stay and help what are presumably hungry sentient toys. Second, and most significantly, it seems as though the speaker of these messages is the same as the white screen messages. The white screen death messages are the most common and have normal text before the get up message appears. It seems to be that this is Poppy speaking to the player, since the messages I still have plans for you and there are fates worse than death would make sense coming from the living doll who doesn't let you leave so that you can deal with the issues going on at the factory. Messages like it's not over and I need you alive would fit into this as well. However, these messages may not be taking place during the events we play through in the game like most assume. Most of the messages fit the events of the game pretty well, sure, but there are a few that don't fit as cleanly. For example, the messages we're just getting started and we're almost there both come from Chapter 2, which seems a bit contradictory, especially since the messages are randomized. There's also the message don't let them inside from Chapter 1, but in that chapter all you're dealing with is the singular Huggy Wuggy, so the phrasing doesn't make sense. Because of this, I don't think that these messages are Poppy speaking to the player every time they die in the game. I think that these messages, all of them, not just the white screens, are the player's memories from before the events of the game, from when they worked at Playtime Co, just from different points in time and points in state of being, so to speak. Here's how I think it happened. We know the player was an employee at Playtime Co, and it's very likely they worked on the toy experiments, evidenced by Mommy Longleg's knowledge that the player worked at Playtime Co. While there, they heard the speaker of the red all-caps messages, whether that be Ludwig, the random science guy, or both, talk about the wonders of science and innovation and how thanks to the experiments, they may forget death. However, the Prototype escapes one day and the factory is put into emergency lockdown. With that, the standard text red messages come in as the experiments are freed by the Prototype and are thankful for their newfound freedom, calling him wonderful. The player hears this as they try to escape the toys, but then the red code messages come in. The speaker, whether Poppy or someone else, tells the player to stay, to help the toys, and that their aggression is simply hunger. But the player can't help. They're too human, too fragile. They die. The player hears a voice saying it's not their time to die. They can die later. They're still needed for something. The red color signifying their memories as a human with the ability to die changes and becomes an unstained white. The player wakes up. The player is grateful to the one who saved them, but they're stopped and told that there are fates worse than death. But there are more lives at stake than just their own. It won't be easy, but death isn't permanent. The player can take it. However, right now it is too dangerous. The situation is too volatile for the player to be able to do anything. The toys need help, but they can't be helped like this. The player is told not to let them near, not let them inside, just a bit farther before they make it to the exit. The player makes it out of the factory, but they're told they're just getting started. There are still plans for them. They're going to need to come back to the factory. The player doesn't want to, but no one in the factory is there by choice at this point. The player could leave for now, but someday they would need to come back. This isn't about them. Eventually, that day comes, and the player receives a note telling them to come back to the factory, where no matter how many times they die, they always get back up. Death isn't permanent, and they're still needed. They can die later, when their task is complete. Are there flaws in this timeline of events? Very likely. However, with what we know of the player and the experiments, I think that something along these lines is definitely possible, but we'll have to wait until a future chapter to find out for sure. Or the movie, apparently, because they're doing that now. It seems a little early to be bringing a movie into the picture, but what do I know? I guess the real question is whether the Poppy Playtime movie or the FNAF movie is gonna come out first. But hey, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments and I'll try to clarify. Thank you for making it to the end of the video, and honestly, if you're still watching, consider checking out one of my other videos. I would really appreciate it. Catch you later!